Good morning, everyone. And I'm going to read some of this because I don't want to make any mistakes, even about myself. Hi, I am the owner of What's Poppin' Texas, and I'm on the executive board of the HEB Chamber and the chair of the Success Goal Team. And this is part of our Success Goal Team um, agenda. This will be the second of our 4 seminars this year that we will be presenting. And thank you to Integris for being the sponsor for this seminar. A little bit about me. I started my adult life as a hairdresser and worked my way into management in a management position with JCPenney. Worked there for 18 years. And then I went to work for a company called Beauty Brands, and I was the district manager in Phoenix, Arizona for 4 years. Loved it. But I missed Texas. Well, really, I missed my family. They wouldn't move. So I came back and I was hired on at Ulta Beauty in Hurst, and I managed that store for almost 10 years, about 9.5 years. Um, and then when I was in Arizona, I met somebody that his mother-in-law, not my mother-in-law, she was, but his mother-in-law that had a popcorn store and he had a popcorn store. And I really got inspired. And I said, when I retire, I'm going to open a popcorn store. And that's what I did. So that's where I am today. Um, and I'm so excited that Susan has agreed to come on this seminar with us. And I'm going to just read a little bit, and I'm going to read it because it's she's so amazing. Susan Looney has over 30 years of strategic human resource experience. She has a passion for human human resources field, and it shows in her work and her presentations. She's successfully worked with many different organizations and assisted them in developing strategies to improve not only their human resource activities, but the culture, communication, and the skills of their management team. Susan has a degree in personal administration from the University of Kansas. You grew up in Kansas, Susan?
No,
And
grew up in Colorado.
oh, so she has her SPHR, which is Senior Profession in Human Resources, and SHRM SCP, Senior Certified Professional. Susan has managed entire human resource departments. She's also had many years experience with small to medium-sized companies, strategizing with them on various human resource functions, including compliance, compensation, programs, performance management strategies, policies and procedure development, talent management, and much more. She is also a highly rated speaker who conducts interactive sessions on HR and management skill topics. Susan was with the Cornerstone Credit Union League, CU, Resources for over 22 years as their Senior Vice President of Human Resources and CU Resources. In her last position at CU Resources, she managed over 45 employees, various lines of businesses, including executive search, HR consulting, financial auditing, strategic planning, and compliance consulting. She has served on a credit union board of directors and has been on the executive committee of various HR councils. Susan started her own HR consulting company in 2018. She's also a member of our new networkers. Thank you. Insight HR Strategies is the name of her company. Insight HR Strategies focuses on helping companies manage their most important asset, their employees. And so now I'm going to turn it over to Susan. I'm going to start asking her some questions. And really, this is kind of just the tip of the iceberg. She will try and answer as best she can, and we will keep this flowing as much as possible because we only have 45 minutes. So, Susan, tell us some of the 2024 trends in hiring.
Okay, well, thank you, Sue. Thank you for that introduction. And just to say that this topic I have done in a full day workshop before, so we're going to hit the highlights in 45 minutes. There's definitely way more to hiring strategies than what we're going to talk about today, but I want to hit some of the highlights. First of all, the employment environment has changed quite a bit in the last few years, especially since COVID. The candidates out there are looking for more flexibility. It's because of COVID, also the younger generation, they want more flexibility in work. Some of us can do it, some of us can't, but we need to think about how can we have flexibility in hours? Can we have different shifts? People want more work-life balance. People, when we offer jobs these days, they're not always negotiating for more salary. They're negotiating for maybe more vacation, time off. People want to work from home. I realize they're in the service industry. I know I see shaved ice. You can't serve ice from home, so there's just some industries we just can't do that. Pay is a big issue, but it is kind of flattening out. I know for a while there we were all freaked out. People were wanting more money. With the economy, it's expected to start cooling. I mean, salaries were going out the roof for a while there. They've plateaued. The average wage increase for the last few years has been about 5 to 7%. Those are going back down to 3.5 to 4%. Pay transparency is a big issue. There are some states, not Texas, that require when you advertise that you post the salaries or the salary range that you are going to be hiring at. And so we'll talk a little bit about that when we talk about job postings. Candidates are making faster decisions. So when you're looking for someone, you need to start when you get that application, the time from when you receive it to when they find a job is shorter. So we got to move faster when we're looking because those good people are going to be snapped up. And also technology in hiring. We'll talk about some ideas of where we can search for candidates. But I know even small companies, there's some resources out there where maybe we can use online applications, maybe with our payroll provider, that will make the process a little bit more faster and easier because we're using technology.
Thank you. Is there something a hiring manager, or sometimes it's the business owner, needs to do prior to starting a search for their new employee?
Yes. So before you even put a job ad out there, you need to make sure you know what you want. So job descriptions are very important. A job description with a summary of the job, the essential functions, and then what are those minimum qualifications that you're going to look for? So do they have to have a college degree? Do they have to have some special skills? Do they have to have experience? Make sure your job descriptions have that minimum experience. Maybe there's things that you prefer. I prefer that they have a college degree, but they don't have to. That's good. But your job descriptions are going to be your minimum. And that's what are they going to be doing? And so you have to have that in mind. What are you going to pay? What's the salary range for that position? And maybe even what are some of those expectations? So when you have a job description, you have on there, answer the phone. What do you expect your employees to do? I can answer the phone and say, yeah, hello. No, your expectations are answer it by the third ring in a pleasant tone. I know when I talk to people about that, they're like, well, that should be a given. But customer service, being professional, we have to define what that is because people don't know. So having all of that established before we even start looking is important.
Thank you. What are some ideas on where we can search for candidates?
Okay, good question. I want to plug the chamber for one. Going out and networking. I know in our new networkers group, people say, "Hey, I'm looking for someone." People have found people that way. One of my clients, he was in his the dentist chair, and he mentioned to the dental hygienist, we're looking for someone. She had a daughter who was looking for a job. She came to work for the client and did a fabulous job. So we talk to people, we network. Your website is a good place to say, "Hey, we're looking." Social media, and I know some of you use social media, uh, putting it on your Facebook page, Instagram. If you have a TikTok, I have a client that does fun TikToks and puts them out there. Of course, there's job posting sites, Indeed, Monster.com. You will probably get a lot more than you that are qualified, but it gets you beyond where your community is. Current employees, have you considered having a referral bonus? So if your employees say, "Hey, if you refer a good employee, we hire them. We're going to give you $100 when we hire them. If they make it 3 months, we're going to give you $200. If they make it a year, we'll give you another $300." So that is a good way, especially if you have some great employees. They may have some great friends also. Um, some of my clients, they have special business cards. So if you have customer service people, or you're looking for people who are good with others, having a special business card with your name and number, but maybe on the back saying, "Hey, you've provided some great customer service. If you're looking at, we'd love to have your type of service in our business. Call if you're interested." So if you go to the restaurant down the street and you have a fabulous waitress, say, "Hey, have you ever thought about a career in the lending business, the mortgage loan business?" Um, that is a good way of just getting your name out there. And of course, putting a poster up, that's good. Now, some big churches will have job boards, schools have job boards. So there are a lot of places to post jobs for free, as opposed to spending a lot of money on the Indeed and Monster. Those are going to run you around $350 a month to post those types of jobs out there.
And I just want to interject. I got two employees off of Nextdoor. Somebody had posted they were looking for a job, and I said, "Oh, what's Poppin's hiring?" That person didn't apply, but two different people did, and I hired both of them. So you're right. Just keep looking. It's amazing where you find that next employee. What
Right.
should we put in the job advertisement? If we're going to advertise, what should we put in it?
So we should be very realistic in the job, what the job is going to do. So you can take the whole job description or summarize it, depending upon how, if you're paying per word or whatever, but try to put as much good information on what's going to be expected of that employee, the minimum qualifications. If you would accept less, then those are not the minimum. So maybe you have preferred, we prefer this. Um, Also, you want to put, a lot of people miss out on having a little blurb about your organization. Sell it. This is your turn to sell your fun place to work. Sue, I bet your place is a fun place to work, around all that food and candy and making stuff. It's, if I was young, that's where I would work. Um, and so selling it, what benefits do you have? Um, and you want to probably put in there, we're an equal opportunity employer at the bottom, especially if you have more than 15 employees. So you want to have that in your job ad also.
Okay.
Oh, and going back to the pay transparency, if you do work in California, if you're posting a job in Colorado, you have to have a salary or a salary range. Now, you may want to consider doing it because it could cut down on applications, people thinking that they're going to make $20 an hour when you're only starting at 13. It kind of cuts some of that out. So you may want to consider putting a salary range or a starting salary in your ad.
Okay. What should what should the application process look like? So,
Okay. So, okay, so once you've run an ad, you start getting applications. Well, let me take a step back and say your application. What should your application look like? You should have an application, have it reviewed by someone, make sure it's compliant with regulations. A couple things that you probably want to avoid: applications used to ask for social security numbers. You probably want to take that off your application. We don't want people's social security numbers floating around and people having access to it. We want to make sure we're asking, the basic information. Are they, what's their address? What's their cell phone number, their email address? We want to stay away from questions that lead to their age, like when did you graduate from high school? Because most people graduate from high school when they're 18 years of age. So we want to stay away from those kind of questions. In some states, it is illegal to ask past salary history. We can ask that question in the state of Texas. It is not illegal. If you're recruiting, somewhere else, if you have a location somewhere else, in a state like California, you cannot ask the history of someone's pay. The reason that they have made that illegal in those states is because they feel it causes pay disparities. Because if you see someone has only been making $15 an hour, sometimes people are like, well, I'm just going to pay you $15 an hour, maybe 16, when maybe everyone else is making 20. So that's why that's that way. On your application, you can ask, have you ever been convicted of a felony? Now, we can do that in Texas, most of Texas. That question is illegal in some states, and it is also illegal in the city of Austin. So if you have a location in Austin, you cannot ask that question on your application. They refer to this regulation as ban the box.
Susan, can you repeat that question? Sorry, my corporate's in Austin, so I was just curious what that question was.
So you cannot, it's called ban the box. You cannot ask on the application if you've ever been convicted of a felony.
Oh, okay.
You can figure that out later in the process by doing a criminal background check and so on and so forth, but you can't ask it at the very beginning. And the reason being, they have a lot of groups out there that are trying to really rehabilitate people who have been in the prison system. And immediately when people see that box check yes, they put it away. And there are some EEO regulations on that, but in and of itself, on the application, we can ask that question. So that's something that you can balance. Is that something I want to have on there? On your application, you want to have disclosures and authorizations at the end, that everything on there is true. You are an at-will employer. You don't discriminate. Then it's gonna have things like you're giving me the permission to do a background check on you. Now, all of that is great. If you are doing third-party background checks, like you're calling a service to do a criminal background check, you're doing a credit check, on that candidate. You have to have a separate disclosure and authorization from your application in order to do those background checks. And we'll talk a little bit more about background checks here in a little bit.
What am I supposed to be looking for when I'm reviewing that application? So I have it in hand. Now, what do I do with that information? How do I analyze it?
Very good. So when you accept applications and resumes, there's a couple things to keep in mind. One, maintaining those applications. You are required by law to maintain those for 1 year, unless you are a government contractor. You have to keep them for, or subcontractor, you have to keep them for 2 years. Everyone else, you need to keep your applications for 1 year. If you have multiple locations, you have to make sure that the process in which you maintain those applications is consistent. You have a location somewhere else, the receptionist takes it and loses it, that could be a problem. So you should have a central location for accepting resumes and applications. Secondly, I don't know if any of you have looked for a job and you've just sent out applications to companies. A lot of companies won't accept unsolicited applications and resumes. They sometimes send it back to you. They'll shred it. As long as the policy is consistent, you can do that. So we only take applications when we have an opening. Now, I know smaller companies will take them and then review back when they don't, even when they don't have something, and they'll look at them when they have something open. You can do that. Just make sure you're consistent and you're keeping those all in a either on your computer or in a file somewhere. Avoid writing on the application, putting codes on there, good, no, or circling things and making just a comment. Those things could be if you got sued, could be in a lawsuit somewhere down the road, and it meant something to you, but it means something. Someone else is interpreting it a different way. So be careful. Don't write on it. Have a separate sheet. Look at the gaps. Sometimes there's good reasons for those gaps in that application. Look for related experience. Don't be, if you're looking for something in your industry, maybe they're just a really good learner and they could learn fast. How do we look at that on a resume? We may see something, but we're going to learn more in the interview. There's a lot of changing views on the job hopping. We used to say job hopping, no, we're not going to look at it. But look at why they've left their jobs. I know on my application, I always put reason for leaving. And if they write personal, problems with management, the next job is problems with management, probably someone I'm not going to call. Look at vague answers, salary expectations. So when we get these resumes and applications, we're going to take a look at it. Then we are going to maybe give them a call and just ask them some basic questions. Can you commute? Are you willing to work evenings? If there's some special qualifications. So before you call people, a lot of people will just call people, schedule interviews, and have massive amounts of in-person interviews. You may want to spend some of your time calling these people and asking them some questions on the application and say, thank you very much. We're still reviewing applications and we'll be making some decisions and scheduling in-person interviews, and we'll get back with you. Now, one more thing, Sue, I'm sorry, is when you're, go ahead. I forgot. Now forgot my train of thought. Go ahead.
Oh, I'm so sorry. So how do we prepare for the interview? So now I've got 2 or 3 people coming in for an interview. How do I get prepared for that?
Okay. So first we want to schedule some really good time, uninterrupted time. Find a location where it's comfortable. I tried not to do interviews like I'm sitting at a desk and someone's on the other side of my desk and it's more of an authoritative interview. I like to sit at a round table, very relaxed, offer them something to drink. So find something maybe that's a little bit more comfortable. Tell staff, hey, don't bother me. I'm going to be in this interview. Look at the resumes and say, what are some of the specific questions I want to ask this person? But then have a list of questions you want to make sure you're asking every candidate. And we'll go over some of those in a minute, but have a standard list of questions, but then you're going to be asking those questions, and then you're going to be asking the specific questions. But when you be prepared to probe. This is your opportunity to really get to know these candidates. And when they answer a question and you don't know what that means, ask. Say, I'm not sure I understand. Can you explain? So make sure you have that list of questions. Now, don't be one of those interviewers that I've seen that has the list of questions, looks up, asks a question, and then is busy writing it down. And then goes to the next one and then is busy writing it down. Have the application, have the resume here. Have notes that you have. Pick up your pen, write a few notes every once in a while. But spend your time looking at that candidate and asking questions. Don't spend your time taking a lot of notes. Use the note-taking time for right after the interview. Give yourself some time between interviews and write those notes. So make sure you glance over, but don't read it to the candidate either. Say, okay, it says here on your resume or your application that you were here. And then don't read the resume back to them. Just be very comfortable and ask them questions.
Now this is one that I've made lots and lots of mistakes at, and I learn as I go. And that's not really the best way to do HR. What are some interview questions you need to stay away from asking?
Okay, very, very good. I know this is an area that I think some people get really scared and they don't ask questions because they don't know if they can ask that or not. So think about discrimination. Think about those things that we can't hire people for. So when you look at the EEO, you look at race, color, national origin, age, disability, sex, all of those things, pregnancy. We can't make employment decisions based on those areas. So we need to stay away from questions that not only ask what sex are you, but we need to stay away from any questions that lead towards that direction. So, for example, like nationality, we cannot ask, are you a U.S. citizen? It doesn't matter if someone is a U.S. citizen or not. We cannot ask that question, but we can ask, are you authorized to work in the United States? What is your native tongue? We can ask, what languages do you speak? If it's relevant to the job. Religion. Now, we're not going to ask people, what religion do you practice? We know that. But we may make some assumptions based on the way someone's dressed. We can ask, what days are you available to work? Here is our schedule. We work every other Saturday. Are you able to work those hours? These are our standard holidays. So religion. Now, there's, once they're hired, we have a dress code. Under religious discrimination laws, we have to make reasonable accommodations. So someone has wears special outfits, is there reasonable accommodations? We don't allow people to wear hats, but they have what is called hijab. It's not a hat, so we have to look at those types of things. Age, of course, we're not going to ask someone how old they are, but we can ask, are you over the age of 18? When we may have a kid that says, you're discriminating against me. There is no laws that say anything about discriminating against a young person. The age discrimination laws are everything over 40. Asking someone, when do you plan to retire? Because who would we ask that of? Someone who is old. So, but we can say, what are your long-term goals? We don't want to ask things about, what is your maiden name? Who has a maiden name? Females. So we can ask in a gender neutral way, have you worked under any other name? Do you have kids? Do you plan to have kids? It seems somewhat, just like it's a friendly kind of conversation, but a lot of times people are asking females that question. Do you have reliable daycare? Again, a lot of times that question goes to the females, not to the males. And so, are you available to work overtime on a moment's notice? Can you travel? Those are the questions that we would ask, as opposed to, do you have affordable, or do you have good daycare? If you get pregnant, oh, you're pregnant, do you plan to come back to work? What are your long-term career goals? Gender. And this one is interesting as of late. I've had some clients who've had some employees they've hired that I have asked after they've hired, what do you prefer to go by? So we can have to, what are your pronouns? So it's changed a little bit like that, but not unless it has been made apparent. So of course, we're not going to say anything about, are you a female? Are you a male? I don't know, Mr. or Mrs. How much do you weigh? How much when it comes to health and disabilities, the question we want to ask, are you able to perform the essential functions of the job with or without reasonable accommodations? Now, if they've been very blunt with you and they've told you, you see they're in a wheelchair, you can ask specific questions of how would you perform this type of function. So we can ask a lot of other questions, but it just depends on how it leads to, would we ask everyone that question? Are we just asking certain classes of people those questions? If we ask a question, we ask it to everyone, and that helps us to get out of that. But if it leads to, when did you graduate from high school type questions, then we know how old they're. Who would you ask? Are you going to retire soon? Same thing if you have a current employee and you're like, man, they're getting up there. When are they going to retire? And you ask that question. That is a discriminatory type question. So we need to be careful. Now, if they say, I'm going to retire, what are your plans? What are your long-term plans? Just like we would ask anyone. Okay. And so I hope that kind of answers that.
It really does. Yeah. And again, I think many of us have made those mistakes. And I love the one, how would you perform this position or this task? Because I've had people with disabilities come and it's like, I know they can't pop popcorn or, handle the task, but I never knew how to ask. So that's good. What kind of interview questions are effective?
Okay, so let me start by saying that before you start your interview, come up with a plan of attack. And typically the way I start an interview is you welcome them in, you have some chit chat. Hey, isn't the weather really nice today? How about them Rangers? Something to make them feel comfortable. When you sit down, kind of go over what's going to happen. Say, well, I appreciate you coming in. I'm going to start, we're going to go over some of your background. Then we're going to, I'll talk a little bit about the job, then see if there's any questions. I like to talk about the job later because I don't want to start off talking about the job, so I give them information on how to answer the questions I'm about to ask them. I will then start with maybe talking about their education, their educational background. Maybe they were in high school, maybe they have a GED, maybe college. What did you study? What did you have this degree? Have you ever thought of what do you want to do with that degree plan? So starting there, and then looking at work history. So let's talk about your work history. I like to work from down to current. And that's just the way I like to do it, and it makes more sense. So I may go to the last job, maybe 10 years, maybe general. I said, what'd you do after you graduated from college? It's not on the resume or application. Just kind of give me a summary what you were doing until you got to this career point. When we talk about the jobs, when they are going to talk about their jobs, what did you do there? Explain to me the duties and responsibilities. What did you like? What didn't you like about the job? Why did you leave? Now, a lot of, I got a new job. When they say that, say, why were you looking for a new job? Why did you want to leave? You said you really liked it. And so that kind of opens it up to, well, I wasn't really comfortable with this, that, or the other. How would your past supervisor describe you? If I were to call them, what would they tell me about you? You can ask things, what was your greatest accomplishment there? What were your challenges at that job? What was most difficult for you to do? What bored you? What excited you? What of that job helped you grow professionally? Did you work alone? Did you work in a team? Which one did you prefer more? And again, here's some of those questions as what are they going to be doing for you? They're going to be working by themselves all the time. So you want to know how they handled some of that in the past. How did you, how were you supervised? Some people like their hands held. Some people like to work independently. So I'm going to work my way to current. And so we're going to go education, work history. Then I'm going to start asking behavioral type questions. So things that their personality, their behavior, what motivates you? What is important to you in your organization skill-wise? So fast-paced, you have a fast-paced environment. Ask them about where they've worked in a fast-paced and how they handled it. Customer service is extremely important to you. Ask them, give me an example of how you handled an upset customer in the past. Do you think you handled it well? How could you have handled it better if they didn't? Stress. How do you deal with stress? Tell me about a situation in which you dealt with stress. So there's a lot of behavioral based questions you can ask, but focus those on the things that are important in your organization. What have you done in the past? Have you hired people and they didn't cut it? What were those personality traits that made them not be able to handle your work environment? You want to make sure you hire someone who can handle those types of things. Then I'm going to go into, tell me what you're looking for in a new position. What do you know about our organization? Did they do any research on you? Why are you interested in this job? Why do you want this job? Why do you think you are the best person for this job? Then I would then talk to them about your organization, the position, This is your time to sell. Sell your organization. You know what? We work hard, but we play hard. You know, we do a lot of, we're really close here. One of my clients has a lot of, we do a lot of 90-day follow-ups with employees when we do exit interviews with people. Everyone says, I love the team here. I love my coworkers. I usually sell that. You know, people here get along. They go out to work afterwards. They are very team oriented. So I sell the organization. Then I ask, do you have any questions for me? They ask their questions. They don't ask their questions, and then tell them what's next. What's to come? Okay, so we still have some more interviews, and we hope to be making a decision within the next week or two.
Okay. What kind of pre-employment assessment can a company do? So what can you do before that applicant even gets there?
So there are some things that, you know, once you interview someone and you think they're good, there's personality assessments. I work with a company that does an assessment, maybe for a higher level job. It looks at what their personality, their behavioral traits, their learning abilities, their interests, and then it matches it to a benchmark that the company has developed. And it says, are they going to be a good fit for our organization? Are they going to be, is it someone who's really, really smart and they're going to be bored? Is it someone who likes fast paced and we're very slow paced? So there's those type of assessments out there. There are skills based tests. Now, when you're using a test, it's important that they are valid and reliable. And what I mean by that is the EEOC has put out a whole list of guidelines on employment assessments. They have to test, they have to be reliable, meaning they have to test what is really being done on the job. And they have to be valid in that they assess the true success in that position. So people who's like, I'm just going to come up with my own typing test. Do they really type, or are they just doing data entry? A 10 key. Do they, you know, I've seen typing and 10 key test. Are they really using a 10 key? Be careful if you're coming up with an assessment. There are companies out there that sell assessments. Now, if you're cash handling and I'm shaved ice, probably you're dealing with cash. Get some fake cash and like have exchange some cash with someone with some fake money and see if they can do it. That is a valid and test to see if they can count cash. You know, again, they have DISC assessments and different things like that. But just if you're going to make one, make it's a real part of a job, or make sure if you're going to do something, purchase it and ask for the organization for their validity testing on that, because that's what's going to get folks in trouble.
Okay, now I find somebody, I want to hire them. Now what do I do?
Okay, very good. So I think the first thing that you would want to do is background checks. Now, background checks are a little bit tricky, and I know a lot of people I talk to don't do them. If you're in the childcare industry, in the finance industry, especially, you got to do your background checks. If you don't do appropriate background checks and something happens with that person, you could be in trouble for negligent hiring. Now, people say, well, I don't get anything when I do it. So there's different types of background checks that you can do. Calling past employers. Now, as an HR person, my clients, I say, we don't give out very much information. We're going to give out, they worked here, these are the dates, and this was their title. And if you give me something in writing, I'll tell you their salary. And that's it. Now, a lot of people don't know that. When I call past employers, whoever answers the phone, I'm gonna say, hey, this is Susan Looney. I'm calling to get calling to verify employment or get a reference on Joe Smith. Joe Smith worked for you, and that whoever that secretary is may go, oh, Joe, yeah, Joe. Oh, what about Joe? So you get people, you're going to talk to people who don't know what the rules are. They can tell me. I can ask questions as if I'm asking Joe questions. So I'm going to ask, did they work there? Can you tell me anything about their work, their attitude, their performance? So I can ask those questions because I would ask the candidate those type of questions. Why did they leave? There's always that question that some people ask, are they rehirable? Some companies have a rule. If they leave, they're just not rehirable. So if they say, no, they're not rehirable, why? Oh, that's just our policy. Or, yeah, they did something funky. So we want to make sure we call past employers. If we don't get any information, we document, would not give us any information. So we're going to document this background check. References. People list references. Those references are more likely going to be people that they've already talked to that are going to give them good information on them. And that's okay. We can still call them if we their employers are all out of business. Sometimes I've had that with or they've worked one place. We can call past teachers if they have references on those people. But the other ones that we can do is we can do criminal background checks and credit checks. Now, credit checks, unless you're a financial institution, they're dealing with money, they're not going to be appropriate to run for an organization. But criminal checks, if you haven't done these, they're somewhat easy to do, but especially if they're going to be dealing with money, we probably want to consider running a criminal background check. Now, there are laws on doing third-party background checks. So if we hire a company to do our background checks, if we hire a company to run our criminal background checks, we are required, like I said previously, to have a separate authorization to do so. Now, when we run this criminal background check and it comes back negative, there's something on there, we are required by the Fair Credit Reporting Act to give a notice to that candidate. We can't just say, whoop, I'm not going to hire this person because of that. There's a couple of things we need to do. Under the Fair Credit Reporting Act, we need to give them a copy of that report and a summary of their rights. And Leah, you probably know about credits and the Fair Credit Reporting Act and giving those notices. The reason why the Fair Credit Reporting Act is out there is because third parties sometimes get it wrong. And so we have to give them the opportunity to say, oh, that's not right, and prove it. So same thing with criminal background checks. Now, with the criminal background checks, the EEOC says that we cannot discriminate against someone just because they have a felony of some kind. We have to look at when that felony occurred, what that felony was, and what the job is. So we can't have a blanket statement that says we won't hire anyone with a criminal conviction. We can't do that. But we have to look individually at those three things. What is the job? They're handling money. They were convicted a year ago for embezzlement. Probably that would be something that we would be okay not hiring that person. So we have to look at those three things when we're looking at criminal background checks. It was a violent crime. They're going to be dealing with kids. Absolutely not. So we have to look at, again, the type of crime, when it happened, and what kind of job that they're looking for. in addition to letting them know here, and this is the reason why you're not being hired.
Okay, we are starting to run out of time. Susan, did you need to wrap up anything?
Well, just a couple things when you get that person on board. So there's drug testing you can do after a conditional job offer, an offer letter. You may want to consider doing an offer letter, rejection letters, I call them. Those people that you don't hire, either call them or let them know, hey, you know what? We really appreciate you going through the process. We've selected someone that we feel better fits the needs of our organization at this time, but we will hold your application in case something else comes. People want to know. They want to have that closure. And then when you hire someone, just a few things that you want to make sure you do. When you onboard someone, making sure that you have you're going to get a W-4 for the payroll, an I-9 that verifies that someone is eligible to work in the United States and they are who they are. You want to get an emergency contact for that person. You're going to give them hopefully a copy of your employee handbook, your benefits, employee expectations. What do you expect these people? The mission, vision, core values of your organization, customer service expectations, a job description, how you're going to evaluate them. And then you're going to get some acknowledgments from them like, oh, I read the employee handbook, and just acknowledgments that they know and they understand some of the policies. And there's a lot more for onboarding, but I'm going to leave it there.
Thank you. You have touched on so many things, and I really, really appreciate this. And I've got all kinds of notes, and I've been doing this a long time. I've been hiring and terminating for a long time, and none of us are the expert, well, except for Susan. And I keep looking at, oh, I do that. Oh, my application says that. So I do appreciate all this. And I have to tell you a little quip. Susan said, you know, you got all this heavy equipment or this equipment. Maybe you should have a age limit on who can operate it. I went, oh, really? And yeah, that was so now my 18-year-olds can't make caramel and they can't pop, and so thank you, Susan. So always be on the lookout and listen to what people have to say, because I know we were just able to touch on a few things. Susan said, if you have any questions, feel free to contact her. And she's a wealth of knowledge. I appreciate that. Thank you to Integris for being the sponsor for our seminar. And this is recorded, so we can go back, and because she gave us so much information, to be able to go back and re-listen to some of this, I think it'll be really important. Thank you, Susan. Safe travels, and thank you, everybody, for joining us. And we'll see you next time. Thanks. Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.